everyone, and welcome to this August edition of Zero In. I'm Alistair Drennan. Today I'm with Elena Ciccotelli, founder of the EVs for Everyone podcast, with Chinese automakers accounting for more than half of the electrical vehicle produced in the world. We talk about the global markets and the future of the EV transition in the US and the EU, and the barriers that we need to overcome and what the enabling environment still needs to be developed in order for both retailers and consumers to adopt EVs en masse. So, welcome, Elena. Could you just start off by introducing yourself and telling us a little bit about yourself?
Excellent. Thank you, Alistair. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much for the invite. I'm, accidentally in automotive, as I like to say. I kind of fell in love with the industry about a decade ago and have been in all sorts of roles on more of the vendor side. I've kind of dabbled in business development to managing very large teams to now content creation and helping show the more human side of what it's like to either drive an EV, what are the stakeholders talking about when it comes to electric vehicles. So, the EVs for Everyone podcast is the show that I host and produce. And I get to talk to really amazing, interesting people like you, Alistair, and lots of really amazing talent all over the world as to how this jigsaw puzzle, this multi layered, multifaceted juggernaut of electric vehicles fits in. And I will tell you, there is never a deficit of conversation. There's always a
Mm.
topic to talk about. So thrilled to be here.
Oh, right. Well, yeah, it's a real pleasure to have you here. And yeah, one of the things that I kind of first wanted to touch upon is actually based off of so we had at our April event we had the now Secretary of State for Energy Security and Net Zero, Ed Miliband, on our main stage, and he was in conversation with the former BBC Science editor David Shukman, who was kind of grilling him really about whether they should lower the tariff on Chinese cars, kind of in the name of climate, or maintain tariffs to protect British industry and jobs. And I'm sure there's a similar conversation happening in the States. And there was a little bit of kind of prevarication in his answers. Wasn't sure what the kind of the policy was going to be. To be fair, this was before the Labour government came in. He said that Labour does plan to invest in the auto industry and says that they have, complete confidence in our car manufacturers that we can produce low-cost EVs. Not sure that David kind of believed that entirely. Wasn't necessarily entirely sold by that. But yeah, obviously, we've got the Chinese selling cars, EVs at a cost of what about sort of $6,000, and they're near total control of the battery supply chain. There's a huge sort of conversation around this. So when you're kind of having all these conversations with people on your podcast or people in the industry, you know, what is the kind of the vibe that you're getting from people in the industry about what do we do with China as this like EV juggernaut?
Yeah, no, it's such a great question. I recently had Michael Dunn on the show. He is in my opinion, the foremost authority on Chinese automotive industry. And so, especially in that conversation with Michael, it just really hit home for me that it's, globally, right? Not just in the US, global automakers are increasingly finding it harder and harder to compete, right? You've got the scale, the sourcing abilities, the raw materials there. You've got really kind of this huge mission of China wanting to and and succeeding, not only wanting to become this tech leader and this big automaker, but actually succeeding and doing it,
Right.
has a lot of automakers just be like, wow, this is happening so much faster than we anticipated. And so I think, again, it's this realization that, again, examples, Ford, GM, Stellantis are now seeing these huge, huge losses. Whereas before, it was almost like this forever profit machine over in China, right? So the Chinese, they love the Buicks and the Fords, and and all the OEMs, especially General Motors and Ford, is like, this is great. We can keep this up forever. This is an amazing place where we can just see profits explode. But the thing is that the Chinese have completely flipped the script. They've learned how to have all these really advanced technologies, from the digital cockpit to the ADAS system to having all of these really incredible machines, right? These really incredible vehicles that, quite frankly, it's a little bit scary and daunting for it competing with that type of vehicle at that type of price point, either Europe, UK, US. Now, again, in talking to Michael, he does advise at the White House and advising on policy, and he doesn't see a future where the Chinese would be able to come in and just just sell their vehicles, right? Because I don't see a scenario with where that is happening.
Hmm.
But some automakers have chosen to be a junior partner with the
Mm.
Chinese in like a joint venture. One example of that is Leap Motor, which is actually a Stellantis brand, where they're in a joint venture with the Chinese, and they're building these vehicles, and then they're being exported and sold effectively under Stellantis nameplate.
Wow.
So whether
Mm.
you
If you can't beat them, join
agree,
them.
right, yeah, so it's like whether you agree or not of the politics of the thing, like these are the decisions that are being made. And when you pull back the curtain a little bit and start to really drill down, because again, going back to my first point, it's the competition is insane. And then when we talk about EVs, which is what I'm really passionate about, you start to see, this huge adoption of electric vehicles in China. And then the other counter argument
Mm.
to that, of course, is like, all right, well, it's state capitalism, and people are saying like,
Right.
this is what you have to have, and this is what you should buy. But they've figured out charging infrastructure over here in the US. It's like, well, maybe we can get some charging infrastructure done. We've been working on this forever and ever, and it made me kind of laugh when I was speaking with Michael Dunn. He's like, we're in the boxing ring, but it's like we're floundering so much. It's like, are you even in the fight? And
Right.
so
Okay.
that's what, that's kind of the vibe that's happening right now. We've obviously we've got BYD is probably one of the better
Yeah.
known brands that everyone's probably familiar with, selling just a staggering number of vehicles. I don't want to throw a number out there because I might be wrong on but it's in the millions. And so it's coming in right behind Tesla, but then other automakers are just like, wow, what are we doing? How can we compete? That's again like the mantra,
Mhm.
how can we compete?
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about Tesla actually, because I think yeah, I'm getting the impression that, the likes of BYD, they're kind of set to take over Ford and GM because even though they're not exporting really into the US or the EU, they are to Africa, they are to the Middle East, they are to Mexico and places like that. So tariffs aside, like that's not really kind of holding them back, and they're still winning really. But
Yeah, and
the
yep.
the the Tesla, they still what's the yeah where does kind of Tesla fit into all of this? Do they still have a kind of advantage?
Yeah, so they do have an advantage. So the one kind of automaker that does have an advantage against BYD, I would say, is Tesla, just because of the technology advancements that they have, right? Even if you just purely look at what they've done with FSD full self-driving mode,
Right.
just pull that little nugget of information out and just extrapolate that. They definitely have just a lot more advantages, especially in the EV space, compared to other legacy OEMs. So, um, I think with Tesla, yes, we did see a bit of a drop in this the last few months in registrations and kind of sales in that arena, but they are still a huge leader, especially in the EV space. It's like, and
Yeah.
also too, want to point out, without Tesla, I don't think we in the US, because we're very slow to change, right? It's like without like having that nudge of Tesla, I don't know if we would even see the small percentage that we do today of EV registrations in the US. So they were definitely the one that kicked things off.
And but it's a very, sticking with the US, obviously we're coming up into election season. We literally just had the DNC, Democrat National Convention. Um, the RNC was quite recently, it's all happening. And yeah, I mean, is there do you have any predictions? Not necessarily for the election itself, but like how are you viewing this from, the perspective of someone within the EV industry? Because I mean, I think Trump, for example, I feel he's kind of made some remarks about opening the door to sort of Chinese automakers as long as they sort of manufacture in the US with US jobs. So but I don't know if he's sort of, I don't know what that sort of conversation is really like. Obviously, there's a lot of EV talk, like which was inbuilt into the Inflation Reduction Act. So I'm just trying to gauge my head around like the Democrat position, the Republican position, and how do you see things moving forward from like a policy perspective, like November onwards?
Yeah, that's such a huge question. And if I knew the answer to that, I would be a gajillionaire because
Okay, yeah,
everyone is, everyone is asking these questions. And I have to take a step back just a little bit here and just say it really is unfortunate that EVs have become such a partisan issue.
right,
We've never before have been hit with OEMs now need to have like these geopolitical advisors now, right? And it's crazy to think that that's where we are, but hey, that's where we are today. So, going back to your initial question, I think when we get into the Democrat versus Republican, it all kind of stems back from climate. Initially, the let's see, we're Democrats are saying we need to push for better climate policy. Electric vehicle transportation is one of the dirtiest industries in the world. We need to clean up what we're doing, save the earth, and very climate conscious. Okay. When we have that type of already, that's triggering. And so when we
hmm
have a climate conscious call to action for mainstream buyers, it's going to fall flat. I don't care what your how amazing the driving machine is. If you're purely going by you want to save the planet, drive an EV, I'm sorry, that's not good enough because guess
yeah,
what? I'm looking at my monthly payments. I'm looking at the fact that groceries are now like, I don't know, four times what they were a year ago. It's insane to run a household right now. On top of that, I want to save the planet. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
there are definite lines drawn in the sand here. And unfortunately, as I said before, EVs have been kind of like caught in the middle. And so I think moving forward towards the election, and regardless of what Trump or Kamala are saying, I think it's gonna come down to jobs, right? Let's be real. And I'm gonna give a shout out to Kia because they just opened a plant in Georgia where they're building their Kia EV9. Guess what? Jobs stimulates the economy. And we have all of these jobs that are that need this new type of talent, right? We're talking about these electric vehicles that are just mind-blowingly advanced. And
Hmm.
so you're going to need that talent. Those jobs are so needed. So I think we need to change the conversation from drive an EV to save the planet to drive an EV to support jobs and job
Yeah.
creation. And let's talk about that conversation a little bit more instead of the other.
Yeah, that's such an interesting point. In fact, we were speaking to somebody um who made a kind of actually a similar point actually this about food actually, where people are saying, if people aren't gonna, eat stop eating bad food even though they know it's making them sick, for
Yeah.
example, like junk food or meat or whatever, if they'll carry on eating that even though it's making them ill, so they're not going to stop it to save the planet, sort of thing. That was a kind
Right.
of similar analogy.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
yeah.
And so the other thing too, I will add to that, Alistair, is we want unfortunately getting into an EV, unless you were part of that early majority, the or early adopters, it's still relatively complex for people to
Mm,
wrap their mind around. We have to make it bone dead simple.
yes.
And we have kind of still this messaging issue, which then gets amplified exponentially by a lot of the political rhetoric that happens. So
Well,
again, like EVs get caught in this crossfire.
but yeah, I wanted to talk about the messaging point actually, because we've talked all the kind of the big politics stuff, everything that's happening upstream, all the all the big things, all the geopolitics and all the automakers and things like that, and what's happening at the White House and everything like everything like that. But yeah, I wanted to really understand how this all translates, downstream, looking at the consumer. And I know you've had a lot of conversations with like retailers and dealerships, and I mean, I know in the States, we did have, the IRA introduced like a clean vehicle credit. So I guess there's some support and encouragement for consumers to adopt EV. But when you've been speaking to either consumers or I know you did a recent episode with some retailers and dealership experts, and we will be linking your podcast in the description. But yeah, what in your view are the kind of the main barriers to just getting customers to buy EVs?
Yeah, it's again a multifaceted issue, and I also want to just touch on something recent that just came out, and it's
Hmm.
that leasing an EV has grown, and it's almost nearly half of the registrations in the US are leases. So you have to kind of take a step back first and look at, oh, interesting, like what is driving all of these leases? And this was all for Q2 of 2024.
Hmm.
And there's a couple of things here. So the leasing, the tax credit, the $7,500 tax credit, is viable regardless of the battery sourcing requirements or pricing requirements. So that's almost, I hate to say the word easy, but a less difficult thing for people to wrap their mind around is, oh, I can get this, $7,500 tax credit. And then the other piece of the puzzle is, and the really smart dealers and the really smart retailers are training their sales staff to understand this, is that, the technology is going to continue to get better. We're going to continue to get new generations of these EVs. Yes, Ford said that they are dropping their three-row SUV and going to hybrids. Yes, okay, that's Ford. But there's a lot of other OEMs out there as well that are going to continue to iterate and have really great technology for these electric vehicles. So you have to remember that we want in these next generations maybe the NACS charging port be integrated into all of these newer generations of electric vehicles, not just the CCS charging point. And if the acronyms are like crazy confusing, that's another thing, that's another hurdle that we have to get over, right? There's so many
Mm.
acronyms and there's a lot of alphabet soup. And so going forward, I think people are starting to realize, if I lease this EV, I can get used to having a lifestyle of charging the EV, getting used to it, and quote unquote bonding with my car and
Yeah, yeah.
understanding, right? Because range anxiety
Range anxiety. Yeah.
lowers the longer that you are in the EV. So quick story about this. There was a TikTok video that I actually did a kind of a stitch on my LinkedIn page with it. And the TikTok video was this guy in a Tesla. He was a brand new Tesla driver, and it was making fun of the fact that he had intense range anxiety. The first frame is him driving the car. He's like, okay, I'm gonna let these other cars pass. I don't know, I have 85% battery left. I'm gonna ride the brake a little bit. Let me just turn down the screen brightness and see if I can get more battery. And then the next frame is him saying, like, let me just turn off the air conditioning. And then like the next frame is me saying, like, there's this chart that says range anxiety decreases with the amount of time that you spend with an EV. And I said, why isn't this the commercial for OEMs to say, like, just get in front of the issue and say, yes, this is probably what we all have felt first time driving an EV, very cautious, very timid. I don't know what it, but once you live with it and once you understand what it's like, then your range anxiety is next to nothing. So again, I just thought I would throw that story
Yeah,
in
that's
there
really cool.
because then it's also it's taking a lot of the hurdles and the obstacles and reframing it, right, which is what I think we really need to do. And the other point that I want to make is what I see really smart retailers doing is they are asking their customers, A, do you have a driveway?
Yeah.
And B, how much time do you spend in the car each day? If the answer to the question of do you have a driveway or a drive, if you're in the UK,
Hey.
then you can say, all right, yes, Alistair has a drive. Cool. How much driving do you do per day? Just or I would say, how much time do you spend in the car per day? Alistair, what's that number for you?
Oh, well, I'm not a driver myself, so I'll give you an answer of, let's say, 3 hours.
3 hours. Okay. So you're in the car for 3 hours. EV is probably not right for you at this moment. But like if your answer was, I don't know, I'm in the car for 20 minutes and I have a driveway, have you considered an
Okay.
EV? You know what I mean? So it's like you're able to kind of cut that decision, the decision tree in half and just make your life infinitely easier to help
Hmm.
like coach people along and see if this is a right fit. And I
Hmm.
know the height of irony here is that the show is called EVs for everyone, but over time it's like, yes, I understand why people don't choose EV right away. And I
Mm.
understand that people are mad because this has been quote unquote forced upon them, or they feel like, now it's like, oh, well, I have to go and change my behavior and I have to change everything that I'm doing. No, it's you have another choice now, right? You
Mm.
can choose while you're driving. And then the other part of it too is because EVs have been heavily subsidized, the other argument is like, oh, well, free market. Free market, you see EVs are not working, nobody's buying them, everybody hates them, and this doesn't work. So again, we're in the first quarter of this game, and I think it needs to mature, it needs to have understanding, and it needs to evolve.
Yeah, I think it's just about like because again in the um, the episode that I was listening to the other day, and it was kind of about just re reaching that sort of tipping point, because I think a lot of the dealers at the moment kind of are a bit frustrated that they have to put a lot of like effort and sort of training into knowing how to sell an EV, but not getting many sales out of it, and therefore probably not as much commission or what it,
Yep.
but when they start to make so really, once those sales start to drive up, then we can reach that tipping point where it will really sort of take
Yeah,
off, I guess.
yeah, absolutely. And so I have a good friend of mine. He's the general manager of Checkered Flag, VW Jaguar Land Rover in Virginia Beach. And he was say, like, he's all on EV. He's like, I'm gonna be the number one EV retailer. Like I'm taking this thing from 0 to 100. And his whole philosophy is like really arming everyone in the store with the information, getting people in the sales staff to drive an EV, to experience it. He's also doing a loaner program where, just get into the EV, drive it around for a couple of days. See what you like about it, what you don't like about it, live with it. And that, again, it goes back to the whole butts and seats comment
Yeah.
of just understanding what this experience is like and if it's actually feasible for everyone out there. And I think it will it just, again, it helps you wrap your mind around it. And the one other thing I do want to mention that is gaining popularity, gaining steam here in the US is subscriptions. And
Yeah.
subscriptions failed miserably before with some of the automakers. It just wasn't the right fit. It was like, oh, you can swap out cars and you can get a sports car for the summer and you can get an SUV for the winter. And it just was a complete catastrophe. But now there are some really smart companies out there who are taking kind of entry level employees who need personal transportation to work, not just taking the bus, because we're not cool like you in the UK. We can't just like hop on the tube and like be places.
Yeah, see, I'm a tube
Yeah,
hopper. That's why I didn't
yes,
give a that's why I gave a
I was gonna
rubbish
say like
question.
we're
I'm like, I'm on the tube.
exactly, like I can't, here in the US, like it just is garbage. So so like, for folks that need that personal transportation to get to work, why not try an EV? You can charge it
Mm.
at work, you can subscribe to the vehicle, break out those monthly payments even to weekly payments. It's helping the dealership out because it's moving these vehicles off their lot. It's this whole idea of asset utilization, which is going to be a huge buzzword for asset utilization, and making sure that we have folks that can get into these vehicles and live with them. And it kills so many, it not kills, but checks a lot of boxes for a lot of people. And so keep an eye out on subscriptions. There's one really great company called Drive It Away that does this really well in the US. They're growing like gangbusters. They work with dealerships on their fleet. They also have their own fleet of vehicles. So it's really interesting to see that financial mechanism kind of pick up some steam because, again, like I said earlier, everyone's looking at the monthly payment. What does this look like for my bottom line?
Well, that's all been like so interesting. I'm really looking forward to us kind of continuing these discussions really, you know, uh, with our upcoming agenda, in which will be coming out next month for the UK edition, and also because obviously we've spoken a lot about the US, so our US agenda will be coming out soon as well. And yeah, definitely we'll be talking a lot about EV. So this has been a really, really cool conversation to have. So thank you so much for talking with us today.
Thank you, Alistair. This has been amazing. We'll continue the conversation. It'll be really great.
For sure. And yeah, and like I said earlier, we're gonna link all the podcasts and links and everything in the description. So yeah, what's some kind of anything that you can tease us on what's coming up with the podcast?
Yes, there are a lot of episodes. So actually, one that's coming out next week is with Auto Trader UK.
Oh
Uh,
wow.
yes, and so that one is going to be all about what's actually happening. The title is Meanwhile Across the Pond. And we're talking about kind of EV registrations in the UK, some of the pushback that the Insight director Nick King is on the show, along with Scott Case from Recurrent, which is a company in the US that does battery degradation reports, which is very helpful for the used EV market. So we have a very, very big conversation about what it's looking like in the UK versus the US. And I'm also going to be having a conversation with a partner from GM Ventures. And I'm going to be asking the question is, are EVs overplayed? Are people sick of hearing about EVs? And so he obviously invests in auto tech companies. And so having a conversation with him about that topic. So looking forward to that. So you can look forward to that episode in September.
Super cool. Yeah, I can't wait to listen to them. So yeah, thank you so much, Elena. Thanks so much. Yeah, take care.
Thank you, you too.
Cheers.